Okay, we're going to try to do this rapid fire because they're not giving us a lot of time and we have to solve a lot of world's problems in just a few minutes. Sylvan Adams talked about the Eighth Front. In many ways, it's the first front because it's actually the front where enemies think that they can defeat us. They can't defeat us on the military battlefield. They try to defeat us in this war of narratives, the war of information. And this has really been the Palestinian strategy from the beginning. And if you just look at Mahmoud Abbas and his history of writing a book and a PhD on Holocaust denial or minimization, and you see the Russian-style propaganda from the beginning of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, you can understand that they laid the seeds for exactly what we're dealing with today already from the 1960s. And we're seeing now how it has really metastasized. And I want to start with Europe, where I think the situation has been very, very acute now for a significant time, maybe more so than the United States. So we should start with Rabbi Margolin. And you know, it's just barely 80 years after the Holocaust, and today is Holocaust International Remembrance Day, and you would think that the memory of the Holocaust would still be sacred. Yet we're seeing a horrific inversion, and my good friend Fiamma Nierenstein told me that just today on the Italian newspaper, they said that the Holocaust has to be viewed in the framework of what Israel today is doing to Palestinians. That's today on the Italian newspaper front page. Can you tell me why you think we see this Holocaust inversion, particularly coming out of European leaders?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Minister Shikli for your brave and great leadership and for organizing this conference with your great team. And before I answer your question, I just would like to say one thing. Despite the fact that we all heard about the bad situation, and really there's no better way to describe it but bad, I don't think there should be one person in this room that should think that there is nothing that can be done. And I would like to give you an example. In the last 10 years, we brought over 1,200 politicians from Europe to Auschwitz. I know everybody mainly remembers the visit of Elon Musk, but we brought many others, not only him. And I could tell you that in each and every one of them strengthened his commitment to combat anti-Semitism. Main activities that were proposed by governments in Europe to combat anti-Semitism in the last decade were supported by members of parliaments and diplomats that we brought to Auschwitz. There are many other things that could be done. And I think that the darkness that comes from Europe is still there, but really no one should think that it is impossible to change it. And I think that if anything, that a message should come from this room today that if not because of many of the activists that are here that made really significant work, the situation would be worse. And I also want to praise the World Maccabi and the Ministry of Diaspora who collaborate with us on bringing politicians and principals of schools to Auschwitz. It made huge impact and it should be continued.
Thank you. Hillel, I think since 1975 and the passage of the Zionism equals racism concept in the United Nations, we've seen not only the systemic bias in the United Nations and its agencies, but actually the systemic weaponization of the United Nations against the State of Israel and the Jewish people. Today at the UN, they are commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day. Tell me, is this genuine, and what are you seeing at the United Nations?
Indeed, today in Geneva, where I live, and in New York, the United Nations will mark Holocaust Remembrance Day. And to me, it sounds a little bit like your local butcher shop hosting a celebration of International Vegetarianism Day. As you said, the United Nations is supposed to be, when they created Holocaust Remembrance Day, we were told that this was to prevent another Holocaust, to prevent the demonization, dehumanization of Jews, which led to the Holocaust. And there was probably no other organization at the international level that is engaged in a form of global demonization of Jews by the endless attacks on Israel at the UN. You mentioned Zionism as racism. In the past year, there was one resolution on North Korea by the General Assembly, one on Iran. There were more than 15 against Israel. Most of the world was ignored. So there is a constant demonization. This panel is about Holocaust denial, and it also must be understood that there's a form of Holocaust inversion, which was mentioned, that regularly takes place. certainly in the past 2 years, but even before. You had people accusing Israel of genocide. Francesca Albanese, most infamously, who regularly falsely accuses Israel of genocide, had been saying this even before October 7th. And in Geneva, a leading NGO activist, works at a women's rights group, Radical Left, told me years ago that Israel in 1948 committed a Holocaust. So the idea of Holocaust inversion, perversely accusing the victims of the Nazis of themselves being the perpetrators, has been sort of gestating at the UN. And Gaza war was a chance, when they had a lot of casualties, to perversely accuse Israel of acting like the Nazis, which is, you know, let's be honest, it's not just one person. It's not just Francesca Albanese. It's many of the UN experts. There's one of them, I just want to quote him. He's the expert on an independent, equitable international order. His name is George Katrougalos, and he said, he's a UN human rights expert. He said, is it possible that the people who endured the Holocaust are now committing the most high of crimes, genocide against their neighbors, September 15th, 2025, and this is pervasive, where you have people like Albanese saying that using the Holocaust as a stick against the Jews. She says, we as Europeans, we more than anyone who allowed the Holocaust to happen, we have an obligation to stop Israel from what it's doing. So in effect, using the Holocaust as perversely as a stick to further demonize and dehumanize Jews around the world, accusing them of genocide, which, let's be honest, the UN plays a major role in an ecosystem of anti-Semitism, where Hamas would put out a lie, a hospital was bombed by Israel, false, on October 17th, 2023. The UN will endorse it, and then newspapers around the world say the UN said. The United Nations, with all its moral legitimacy, giving its imprimatur to the demonization of Israel.
Eric, it's not just the UN, it's not just European leaders, it's also mainstream media. We saw how the New York Times, the quote-unquote paper of record, which covered up the atrocities of the Holocaust in real time, now, just several months ago, placed a picture of a child that they knew had a horrific genetic disorder on the front page of the paper to use it to demonstrate their false narrative that Israel was using starvation as a policy against Gazans. Tell me, how does this actually threaten Jewish communities in the United States in real time?
So I have to say that this example that you've just cited is a very, very serious situation that caused serious damage. That the window of time in which that picture was being circulated, and by the way, it's not just that it was circulated by the New York Times, it's that it became obviously promoted on social media and on the algorithms of social media and spread, so it was the most pervasive image of the war. This was clearly the low point of the war, certainly in the United States and North America, without any question. And it not only changed public opinion in a very, very broad way, had a huge impact on public opinion in America. It even seeped into decision makers. I was in meetings in the highest levels of the United States government, the administration at that time, not the current administration, where they were reciting this, this meme about famine and Israel causing famine. Now, whether that was because they really believed it, or whether because it was the political pressure coming at them, I can't say for sure. But this was deeply damaging to Israel's ability for our ability as the Jewish community in North America to maintain and build support. So, and of course, when the apology finally came, or the acknowledgement finally came, it got no attention whatsoever. And so this is a seriously problematic challenge for us. We can, and we do, in every community across North America. We go talk to the local officials. We go talk to the local media. We make sure they know that these images are false, and we counter it in the local communities to protect the safety and security of the local communities and to fight against incitement. But it's very hard at the national and global level of these media outlets.
Tila, we're seeing it's not just in the mainstream media, it's also really infected influencers. And I think that there was no greater example than just in the last 2 weeks when we saw in a nightclub in Miami, Nick Fuentes, avowed anti-Semite, went to the club supposedly for the first time, and the DJ's playing a song from Kanye West called Heil Hitler. Tell me a little bit about how the Miami community has reacted and gone on the offensive after this.
It happens to be that the mayor of Miami, Stephen Miner, is in town here in Israel. We had dinner together. We actually spoke about this yesterday. In Miami, there's zero tolerance for hate, and not just towards Jews, but we have many minorities living in Miami. There's a lot of Latin, Hispanic communities from all kinds of backgrounds. There's minorities from Haiti, from Cuba, from Venezuela, from everywhere. And so there really is a melting pot of minorities that come together to support each other. And having grown up in Miami, I personally still have never experienced firsthand anti-Semitism. And I don't think it's because people love Jews. It's because you have law and order, the leadership starts from the top, and people are not afraid to say what they believe in and what they really want to stand for. So this situation at the Club of Miami, it was like very easy to shut down because every single elected official, every single local leader, every single club and nightlife owner immediately came out, condemned it, and shut it down. So by the time people were reaching out to me as a Jewish community leader saying, what are we doing about this? Let's go protest outside the club. The club had already been shut down. The DJ had already been fired. Nick Fuentes and all his Nazi friends had already been banned from every single nightlife institution in South Florida. And when you come to Miami, there's a guy named Adam Sosnick. He's on a very famous podcast with PBD, Patrick Ben-David, and he actually called in one of the guys the next day. He's a Jewish kid who grew up in Miami, and he said, hey, why'd you do it? Like, why were you hanging out with them? And why didn't you go sit at the box with other social media influencers, with the president and Marco Rubio the night before where there was a college football final? Why did you pick to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? And the guy said, I messed up. So there's no tolerance in Miami, and law and order and consequence, real consequence, shutting these things down is what takes care of it immediately.
We're running short on time. I want to get rapid fire answers here. Rabbi Margolin, you've talked about the urgency here and seeing a correction. Tell me why you think that the problem is so urgent.
You know, the Jews used to be approximately 2.5% of Europe's population. Today, the Jews are 0.2% of the population in Europe. The numbers will continue to go down unless government really make a significant decision that they would like to ensure Jewish life in Europe. We called all European governments to recognize the Jewish community as a protected minority. We believe that that will be the only solution to have Jewish life in the future. Of course, all those I do already last year, I called the minister for the government to prepare enough houses in Israel for all the European Jews that will certainly come to live in Israel. But the only solution right now is for the governments to decide that all the Jews are a protected minority. This status exists in the law. That means that the governments will be obliged to provide the security, the freedom of religion, to fund institutions, culture, and that everybody in Europe will learn about the Jewish contribution and why they should cherish Jewish presence. If not because of protected minority, there's no doubt that within very short time we'll not be able to see any more visible Jews on this continent.
Hillel, it's not just Holocaust inversion denialism. We're also seeing at the UN October 7th denialism. Can you tell me a few examples?
Yeah, well, the most famous is, just a couple of weeks after October 7th, Antonio Guterres came to the UN and he said, yes, I condemn what Hamas did. But he said, also important to note that the Hamas attacks did not happen in a vacuum. Did not happen in a vacuum. And then he went on to enumerate numerous alleged Palestinian grievances, in effect, Secretary General of the UN justifying what Hamas did. It's a form of denying October 7th, basically saying it's a justified response. Francesca Albanese repeatedly has said, even to President Macron, that what Hamas did was a response to Israel's oppression. Finally, people like Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur Reem Al-Salem, said that there's no evidence of sexual assault against women on October 7th. These are shocking forms of October 7th denialism, like Holocaust denial.
Eric, immediately after October 7th, we started to see protests around the world, and I think one of the most shocking was all the encampments that we saw on the university campuses. Tell me what you think the situation is now for students on Jewish campuses after those encampments, and if you're seeing any encouraging signs of improvement.
So we are, but we are because there's real pressure being applied on the universities. Look, these encampments were serious challenges because they were intimidating and they were threatening the Jewish students. Frankly, unfortunately, they were being welcomed by too many campuses, including faculty participating and universities treating it like just, acceptable levels of protest. And they were all in violation of university policy. What we did first as a community was organize to insist that universities enforce their policies and local communities enforce their local laws. And then we were joined by the new administration when the Trump administration came on. And last night, Leo Terrell was one of the great leaders of this that put federal government pressure on the universities. So the safety and security situation has improved, but the climate on campus hasn't. And in fact, you may have seen the article, the report that was just released about basically all Jewish administrators being eliminated at the City University of New York, which is one of the most historic places for Jewish upward mobility in America. So we have real challenges still on university campuses, but I do want to agree with my colleague here on the panel that it's not everywhere. And if you go to wonderful universities like in the state of Florida or in Texas or in a number of other great places in this country, you will find that universities have controlling their campus and are very welcoming to Jewish students, and we need to promote and support those universities that are.
Tila, 10-second last words. Why is it so important to go on the offensive in the fight against anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is a human rights issue, and it's globalized under that umbrella. It's very important to make it not socially acceptable to hate in any form. And when people understand that first they start with us and then they're going after everyone else, that's when they're going to understand that there needs to be real consequence. So we have to have a unified voice. Thank God we have a lot of friends, Jewish and non-Jewish, which we see in this conference, which is really a breath of fresh air and the light at the end of the tunnel. And we can't stop fighting because anti-Semitism is not new. It's the oldest form of hate. And they're blaming it on Israel and calling it anti-Zionism. But well before there was a Jewish state, people hated the Jewish people. The difference is that now we have a Jewish state, we could do something about it, and we will do something about it.
Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists.